welcome to the November GMC membership meeting. My name is Peggy Kelsey, and I have the distinct pleasure of being the chair of the GMC board. Before we begin, Marquette has asked that I read a statement. They're not singling us out. This is a statement that is required to be read at events like this. The 500-year tradition of Jesuit education is grounded in the search for truth, the discovery of knowledge, and the sharing of diverse viewpoints. As an institution of higher education in the Catholic Jesuit tradition, Marquette University is committed to freedom of expression and open inquiry, deliberation, and debate. The views expressed here today are those solely of the speaker and not of Marquette University. The use of Marquette's facilities does not constitute an endorsement of the views expressed. Marquette University does not endorse any candidate for public office, political party, or referendum matters, and no fundraising for these activities can take place at this event. All right, now to continue our regularly scheduled. Sorry, Andrew. We are gathered here today on Veterans Day. Many thanks to those who have served our country so selflessly. Let us recognize the selfless work of the veterans in this room and in our lives with a round of applause, please. Today we gather in another spectacular place, probably someplace that's new to many of you. The College of Business Administration, or O'Brien Hall, at Marquette University. Opened in 2023, O'Brien Hall was designed to serve students in a comprehensive capacity, offering centralized advising, a student success center, and a business career center, in addition to the classrooms, study spaces, and faculty offices. The building isn't just a place for business students, though. Incorporated into the design and strategy of O'Brien Hall are event spaces that offer a deeper connection between Marquette University and our Milwaukee community. You may have seen a bunch of students exiting this very room prior to our meeting. That's why we were hanging out there with the doors closed, like we were at a gala for a while. Imagine the confidence these students feel in their future every time they see a group of business or community leaders personally invested in the place where they come to learn and to grow. This is a great example of how we can support Milwaukee's future talent. And here to tell you more about supporting the crossroads of community and academia is today's host, Andrew DeGeer, the James H. Keyes Dean of Business Administration at Marquette University. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So it's just so exciting to have all of you here. I just want to say literally welcome home to all of you, because I have offered to Joel that if you don't have another place to meet, this is your home. And that came from the vision of my predecessor. He also happened to be my advisor, Joe Daniels. Joe is the dean of the college, who is sadly, tragically killed in a car accident about 4 years ago. But in the previous 30 years, Joe showed up on the campus when I did back in 1990. He was a fresh PhD from Indiana. And he did so much to help me navigate my career, my life, my training. And he did so much to create a space, because his vision was to have this be, at the crossroads, the center for business in Milwaukee. 16th Street, Wisconsin Ave, one of the main intersections in the city. Just like Peggy described, this space was designed to be that home and that hub to welcome all. And so that's really the kind of interaction we're trying to drive. My journey here is interesting, because being a grad from 1993 in economics, you really didn't want to have to find the old business school, because it was tucked away elsewhere on campus, and It felt almost like a nuclear fallout shelter. Now you have this amazing space that really is easy to welcome everybody into. And then for me, I've gotten my chance to do a tour of southeastern Wisconsin. After graduating, did 10 years out on the East Coast, but was relocated back to my hometown of Johnson Controls and was there for 12, 13 years doing corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions. Got stolen by some friends out to Quad Graphics to help teaching old printers some new tricks. And then, hello, Steve Radke. We got to meet 7 years ago when I got pulled into Northwestern Mutual to help navigate transformation of the business. But the connections don't just start there, because I see somebody that I used to come down Beverly Place in Wauwatosa and sell Cub Scout candy to. I've got a relative in the room, points if you find that person. I've got the father of my son's prom date in the room, if you can find that. But it's also many business connections in the room where we interact through UWM and various partnerships there. And I think that really speaks to all of those different threads, why this group is so important and why hosting it here is so important, is to create those natural interconnections where we can do so many good things to help make Milwaukee and the region better. And so having a strong educational institution here, partnered with another strong educational institution just down the road, really provides so many opportunities to help make the region even smarter. And we can do that through the combined research, education, professional development that this offers to all of the different employers in the region, because that's what's going to help generate growth, is we get more people and we make those people more productive. And so this being that destination and that home and that hub for you makes us so happy to have you here. So again, welcome, and I will kick it over to, hey, wait, Joel, where did you graduate from?
Marquette University.
All right, excellent. Welcome, everybody.
I think I graduated, Andrew. And I also want to just follow up what Andrew said. The parent of my son's future prom date may be in the room. Prom is in May. My son's a senior in high school. He's had some trouble getting dates, so after we are done. Thank you, Andrew, for hosting us here today, and also to Kimo Ayun, the interim president and provost at Marquette University, who has been leading this ship for the last several months here at Marquette. I think we all, being here today and being in the presence of this place, we can't help but evoke memories of Mike Lovell, who left us way too soon, just several months ago. And we honor him, I hope we honor him by being here and continuing to do what he had done and make a mark on this community. I lived in this very place as a freshman at Marquette University. McCormick Hall used to stand here. It was known as the beer can, and it had its day and its place as a place where freshmen at Marquette spent that first year. That place, however, had come and gone, and the reimagination and reinvigoration of this space, as Andrew just said, it will help prepare young people to contribute to Milwaukee and to their world. And the opportunity for community partners to actively participate in this work elevates our ability to support a stronger Milwaukee future. I want to just share, to start with, a handful of Greater Milwaukee Community strategic updates. Our Milwaukee Appraiser Diversity Initiative will begin its first cohort of 10 appraisers in training in January. The first call for applicants resulted in an impressive nearly 90 submissions. Nearly 30 of those are being interviewed to be part of this 10-person cohort. Chudno Valuation has agreed to partner with Maddie by offering paid experience for the cohort as they gain the required 1,000 hours in field work during the program. Just last week, our GMC Public Safety Committee met to preview an upcoming Wisconsin Policy Forum report. As people may be aware, we have partnered over the course of 2024 with the Policy Forum on 3 different reports that are all related to public safety. This one, which will come out within the next few weeks, examines changes in the Milwaukee Police Department's arrest and traffic stop patterns since 2012 and compares Milwaukee with peer cities around the nation, in addition to outlining some of the some information and data about public surveys and City of Milwaukee public surveys related to public safety and the police department. We hope that it will be another step in building where we need to go as a community and how all of us can be constructively involved in the conversation and the action around public safety. This group, led by Dan Bader and Ernell Lucas, continues to define its role in reinforcing existing public safety institutions and promoting collaborative, connected environments that foster safer and more resilient city and community. A few weeks ago, our partners at the City of Milwaukee presented an overview of the Mayor's 2025 budget, providing further insight for our 3 task force groups who are following up in ways that hopefully strengthen services while saving taxpayer dollars. The Mayor is here with us. I think the budget is now awaiting your signature or your action on veto, right? You don't have to, I know you're chewing, you don't have to say anything, but the Common Council has acted on that. We have had community members involved in those discussions, and that will continue to flow in the next few weeks. In the coming days, just later this week, the Greater Milwaukee Committee will convene stakeholders and community partners to discuss the future of Milwaukee's lakefront. The investment at the lakefront over the last quarter century is truly remarkable. We're all aware that important connections are still lacking on the lakefront. We have the ability in our community to knit the area together more fully for the sake of our residents, our stakeholders, and our visitors. We'll report out in the spring as these conversations continue to take place. Now on to today's conversation. We all should spend time on a college campus every once in a while, even on a windswept day as today is, because the energy and optimism on college campuses, no matter where you go, is contagious. With the challenges we've faced in K-12 education in Milwaukee in the last several years, energy and optimism can often be lacking. It's no secret that Milwaukee Public Schools have faced major challenges for decades, and 2024 has brought many of them directly to the surface. MPS is Wisconsin's largest school district, responsible for educating nearly 60,000 students. For decades, declining enrollment, suboptimal outcomes, facility challenges have been the norm, and no one in this room believes that Milwaukee will be what we dream it can be without a higher performing system that provides hope and opportunity for a greater share of our kids. After the approval of a $252 million referendum in April, fiscal and financial management issues came to light that resulted in additional funding cuts, education and programmatic challenges, and ultimately the resignation of several MPS leaders, including Superintendent Keith Mosley. It also led to the pursuit of recall elections, talks of governance change, even within the leadership of the GMC board, and an overall sense of frustration, even anger in the Milwaukee community. That's a brief summary of where we've been. Today's conversation is hopefully a first step in where we're headed from here. Today we welcome MPS Interim Superintendent Eduardo Galvan to join us for a candid conversation about the state of MPS. 2025 will bring opportunities to determine the productive roles that each of us can play as collaborative partners or individually to disrupt the unacceptable status quo related to education in our community. We greatly appreciate Mr. Galvan's willingness to sit down with the GMC today to discuss how we all provide the best outcomes for Milwaukee's youth. Eduardo Galvan served as regional superintendent in the Southwest region from 2018 to June of 2024, when the Board of School Directors selected him as acting superintendent, holding the full duties and responsibilities of superintendent. His background with Milwaukee Public Schools goes back to the summer between his senior year of high school and freshman year of college. when he ran summer camps for Milwaukee Recreation, a division of MPS. He's been an educator since 1992, serving in a variety of capacities, including teacher, assistant principal, and principal at View School before taking on his current role. I ask you to help me welcome Eduardo Galvan. Heather's going to help us put on these little things here. That work? A little higher up. You good?
Can you hear? Try it again.
Check, 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 check. A little higher up probably is better. All right, and the way we're going to do things today, we're going to have a discussion amongst the school bus here. There's going to be discussion at the table, but then there will be a significant amount of time where we'll come back up at the end. You can ask questions of things that came up at your table or things that we didn't go over. So there will be opportunities for there to be engagement between the superintendent and the rest of us in the room here. The questions that I will ask, many of them were submitted by you, the members, and some of them are ones we have come up with on our own. I did share most of these with the superintendent in advance. This is not, at least our portion isn't going to be anything about trying to be secretive or laying anything on him. This is hopefully going to be a discussion and a constructive one. The thing I would start by saying also is this is a discussion mainly around the public school aspect of K-12 education in Milwaukee. But as you look across the room here, there are stakeholders and there are people who are deeply involved and invested in education in Milwaukee in all corners. People and companies that have traditionally supported the public schools and K-12 education through MPS, those who have established charter private schools, those who have been involved in those things deeply. So I would just offer up to start with that this is a room that is definitely, and I think you're showing up today, your investment already, this is a room that's invested in education in Milwaukee, and I hope you, superintendent, kind of take that as the way we start things. All right, so I've got my list of questions here today, but initially, I hope that maybe you just talk a little bit about your first 6 months on the job, 2024 at MPS, a little bit more about your background as you care to tell. I know I said I went to Marquette, you didn't go to Marquette, but you have some family members who did. So however you just want to start, we'll take a few minutes doing that.
Again, thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to be here, and it's an honor to...
You know, the mics aren't working, and it's a little hard to hear.
Okay.
Hello. Hold it. All right, now, slow. Again, thank you very much, Eduardo Galvan. As Joel had said, I've been a lifelong adult employee of MPS, 32 years. Both my sisters came to Marquette, just to break the ice for anybody that's from Marquette. My brother went to UW Milwaukee, as did my son, just recently graduated from there. My father spent some time at MATC. I went to Carroll University. Back then it was Carroll College. My daughter graduated from UW-Madison. I think I got them all covered. All right. Again, both my parents were immigrants. My father from Mexico, my mother from South America. And the reason I mention that is because for them and for me, education was always at top of mind, right? I think for many, doesn't matter where you come from, when you come here, that's part of why you come here, right? To get a great education, to use that to then propel your life forward. So it's always been top of mind for me. How can I help those students that I serve, particularly in Milwaukee? I'd also, before I get started, just want to draw your attention to that table to my left up in the front here, because all that I do is through the help of some wonderful people that I have working for me. And I won't take the time to introduce them all to you, but later on, when you get a chance, you'll want to meet them because they are helping me to do this work and to do the right thing for our kids and for the city of Milwaukee. All right.
So well, let's start with a question around facilities and programs. There is the ongoing planning related to facilities maintenance and management of the next 10 years, the establishment of that plan. Just a couple statistics to share with people. In the United States, the average age of public school buildings is 49 years. 38% of those were built before 1970. So that's the US average. In Milwaukee Public Schools, the average age of a school building is 82 years. 85% of those buildings were built before 1970. You have 149 buildings, I think, give or take, within MTS right now. And you have had over the last 20 years a significant down, the student population has gone down. 24% reduction in births in the city of Milwaukee between 2010 and 2022. So obviously, far more than you have. Can you give us a sense of where things stand? Most people, I think, are aware of the facilities plan and the drafts that have been out in recent weeks, but from your perspective and MTS's perspective, where do things stand right now, and where are the next steps for that?
So again, as you mentioned, many of our buildings are aging. So it's not just the age of the buildings, but it's what we're able to offer in those spaces, right? As you look around in different places and what education now looks like and what it should look like, you look around here and all the wonderful spaces. So those are parts of this plan as well. I think obviously for the general public, the biggest question is how many buildings are you going to close? When are you going to close them? I think the more important question is how do we deliver what our students need to receive what they deserve to have, which is a quality education with quality programs in buildings that are in better shape, so to speak, right? So those are parts of the conversations. I think for those of you who have followed along with this, it began way back last spring when we engaged our community to tell them, hey, this is a study we're going to do. What are things that are important to you when we do this study? Subsequently, in October, we had some community meetings where we invited the public to come in and tell us, because what we had done before that was purely based upon data. Numbers of students in a classroom, number of students in a building. Where are our buildings that need the most repair? What are the buildings that have ADA? All those questions are purely statistical, purely data-driven. But that's not the only thing that matters and shouldn't matter, right? Our community matters, their input matters. So they came back to us and said, hey, we need to examine why or what drove people to move to different parts of the city, right? So another thing it's very evident if you look at our data is we have a number of schools that are very over-enrolled, right? Over our capacity, and then we have a number of schools that are low. We also tend to see that a number of our schools in the central part of our city are under-enrolled. Some of that is simply because we had a larger number of schools in that area, but also a perceived lack of what they need, whether that's programmatic, whether that's safety, or whatever that reason may be, has caused many of our families to go different parts of the city. There may be a school across the street, there may be a school a block away, and they're not choosing to go there. So we have to examine why that is. If it's programmatic, how do we make sure that we have programs there so that those families choose to stay there? That accomplishes two things. One, it builds community in that neighborhood around a public school, and two, it helps us save money on transportation. But we have to make sure that our families want to engage in that, because another thing is our community, our families have options. We don't dictate to our families what school you have to go to. They have options to do that. And again, the elephant in the room is also, as we all know, we're a very segregated city. We're a city where a lot of movement has been kind of pushed along by past practices. So those are all very important considerations. So when we talk about next steps, it's not just a question of closing schools or merging schools. It's a question of policy. Do we reconsider policies that allow options to go wherever you want, whenever you want? Not that we would deny them, but then maybe that means we don't provide that transportation. How do we get our families to reinvest in those schools in the areas that they live in? Because again, That's an important aspect of this. We don't want to vacate a part of a city. We want to make sure we grow that, right? We want those students to remain there. Any schools around here in Marquette, you know, you would like for those students to grow up seeing Marquette, maybe one day attending Marquette or Carroll. But those are all goals that we have to take into consideration. So we are going to form some committees, and certainly I'll reach out to Joel and give you the exact details of what that is, so that our communities can then have a greater conversation about if it's a merger, what does that mean? How do we reinvest in a building? So for example, if we're merging 2 buildings into one, that vacated building, we can decide, we'll talk about that I'm sure a little bit later, but that building where they're going into, how do we invest in that building, be that programs, be that some sort of a modification to a building, because again, those are things that we also have to consider, because all this means money. And you know, money, it is always a driver for everybody, especially for those of you in business. You understand that as well as anybody else. So we will get that committee, those committees formed, a larger committee and then a smaller committee where we will take input from the community, most importantly from our students, our families, our staff, because they'll all be impacted by those decisions.
So just a quick follow-up on that. There was some criticism that was levied because apparently another consultant, actually the consultant that's now been chosen by the governor to do the operational review, did a similar study, similar analysis 6 years ago, and not much happened. I mean, clearly, maybe just from a practical standpoint for the people here, there will be no closures, I think, no closures next year or potentially even the year following. It's inevitable, again, my words, not yours, but it's inevitable that there will be some, and the next step in this is putting together these committees. The consultant has suggested these. Those will meet over the course of 2025, and there'll be some more finality on this and kind of what the outlay is in 2025.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. Again, what I caution everybody with is this idea that we're going to identify a school tomorrow, and that'll be what happens with that school, because for those of you that are well versed in the city of Milwaukee, one of the things that we've also see is we have a great deal of mobility. So our families move, right? And that can be impacted by a number of things, whether that's economic, whether that's, again, our perception of a school, and they want to be somewhere else closer to that school. So those are all things that we need to consider, because again, the last thing I think that anybody would want us to do is to make a decision without that input, without that forethought, without that planning, and then have that work out to be an experience that doesn't benefit our students.
Last quick question on this topic. The MPS has a number of successful models. My children were students at Golda Meir, magnet school. The IB programs, Montessori, the language immersion, those are examples of things that have demonstrated success, yet they haven't oftentimes been scaled, or there's limitations on those. Can any of this, instead of just be a conversation around, although it should be a conversation around less real estate and a smaller district, can it also be about expansion of any of those successful programs that have demonstrated success?
Of course, and that's something that I think we already do. For example, we have the largest representation of Montessori schools in the nation, right? Free public Montessori schools, right? What we do with our language learners is, I would say, the best in the state. So those are all things that we look to expand. We always look to the place where would they best fit. Some of the challenges are, and maybe this is where those of you who have school-age children, maybe encourage them to go into education. That's one of our main challenges when we talk about expanding programming, specifically when we talk about either bilingual, Montessori, language immersion. Those are all fields in education which go beyond just a traditional general education certificate. You then have to go, if you're going to be a Montessori teacher, you have to go to a Montessori institute to receive that training, above and beyond, right? If you're going to teach bilingual or language learner students, you have to go beyond your regular certification to do that. And quite simply, some of our efforts to make expansions to those programs have been hindered. Special education. We do not have enough special education teachers to meet the needs of our students. And again, I think it's very specific to MPS because the number of our students that serve those populations are higher, right? But this is a nationwide trend. I think there's some individuals here in the room, some of our partners, MATC, UW, Milwaukee, who could tell you better than I can, the numbers aren't looking great for education. So how do we make that more attractive as a community? How do we build that up so that teachers aren't vilified and not even vilified, but it's not held in the same esteem as it once was. And that's, I think, more of an a community, right? To value that, to value what public education means, regardless of how you feel about it, we need educators.
Let's move on to academic performance. This question from a GMC member. Do you believe that academic outcomes should be the #1 priority as superintendent? And if so, what are you in the district doing to address low levels of academic achievement and ensuring that the students are meeting state expectations around their learning?
Absolutely, academic outcomes are my top priority, and I would guess any superintendent's priority. What I would say is that academic outcomes don't live in a silo, right? They are impacted specifically by the community, specifically by family, specifically by what that experience is for that child. So in Milwaukee, when we talk about academic outcomes, we have to talk about things. Do you have a stable home? Do you have a family who can support those efforts? That's not exclusive to success in school, but I can tell you from personal experience and from most of the people that I know that are successful, they've had a parent behind them. And if you're lucky, you have two. And those are people that also value education, has had some success in education. And when those things aren't present, it just makes our job a little bit harder, right? And that's not an excuse, that's not us walking away from that. Those are realities, right? When you don't know if you're gonna have a decent meal, when you don't know where you're going to go to live in a month or 2 months. That's a reality for a number of our students. And then it goes into when we talk about, greater things such as societal violence. All those things impact your ability to come to school and learn. So again, I don't say those things as an excuse. We need to do better. I'll be the first to tell you that, and everybody at that table will tell you I've said that. But we also have to understand that there are other things that we have to work together with others within our community to improve so our students have that opportunity. To your question, what we're going to do. So part of it begins with, again, and I'll keep touting some of our partners here, MATC, UW Milwaukee, we need to work to train our educators so that they're able to work in our urban setting, hopefully, or wherever they choose to go, right? So we need to, move away from the days of, for those of us who, well, for myself, 57 years old, when I went to school, it was sit down, be quiet, learn. That was our experience, right? Or somebody would stand at the lectern and give you a lecture, you'd take notes. That was the experience. There's room for that, but there's different ways of doing things that our students need and value. In terms of early literacy, we've worked, as you all know, we are working with the state to enact law that has more pedagogy around learning how to learn in a scientific way. These aren't new things, right? We've done this work before, but we're working hard to make sure that all our teachers get that training so that they all can implement that effectively. We've worked to improve our math scores. Last year we ran a pilot with all of our middle and high schools, specifically our high schools, to see if the new math adoption, new math curriculum that we adopted would provide some positive outcomes. And early returns on that are very positive. So those are things that we're very proud of and where we know we have to improve that. We've done some work around 53206 and other programs specifically designed trauma-informed specialists. all of our resources, although maybe not directly at the classroom, all go towards the classroom. So if you need help from a social worker, if you need help from a school psychologist, if you need mental health supports, again, we provide that so that at the end of the day, the focus can be on learning.
I want to ask you, we're going to get to discussion with the group here before too long, but a couple of things. Education often, unfortunately, is an issue that divides the community instead of finding ways for us to come together. People are in or have traditionally been seen as being in a camp of one particular sector or another. Is there an issue you can identify for like the 2025 that could be a unifying issue across all those sectors that we together as civic leaders might be able to get behind and say, this is an issue that every one of those, whether you're in a charter, you're a private school, or a MPS student and family, this is an issue you need to get behind and the rest of us can be galvanized behind?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Two things. One, directly related to education funding. I know that's sometimes an evil word and people don't want to talk about the funding issue, but the reality is, and this is not just a Milwaukee issue anymore, I think for years it was seen as just Milwaukee. Well, I think recent data with 100 or 100 plus schools that have gone to referendum, almost every school in our entire state has gone to referendum within the last 10 years. I mean, that speaks volume to what are we doing in terms of funding education for our students across the state, and specifically in MPS. This issue of special education funding is something that I think impacts every single school, public, private, charter, across the state. We simply don't have, we're not being funded at a level that's appropriate. So, and I believe it's 33% as I look over there, yes, yeah. It's certainly not enough. And what that does then, it's not necessarily that, well, just don't give it to them. Well, it's a law. We have to provide special ed services. So when we don't have the funding, that means we're pulling funding from other areas to support that so that our students can meet the letter of the law there. Other things that I think can impact learning, I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but stable housing, resources within the community. Again, we have wonderful partners, and I'm sure they would say these are needs as well, but how do we, relate it back to facilities, right? How do we get a family to stay in a home or an apartment, be able to establish roots there, go to their neighborhood school, establish roots there, and build community that way? Those are all things that we need to address, but specifically, those are two things that come top of mind.
All right, I got two quick questions more, then we're going to get into the discussion and then come back for any things that comes out of that. Truancy and absenteeism. Truancy and absenteeism, I think it's defined as missing 10% of the classroom days in a school. Between 2006 and 2020, that never went above 13% across the state. It peaked at about 20%. It's gone down a little bit, and there is an effort nationally, and there's some things that are going on to try to make it more attractive to bring kids back to schools. They put laundry facilities in schools, extracurriculars, things like that. Are there things that MPS is doing now, or things that you would like to test that the rest of the community maybe should know about, or that we can get behind?
Yeah. Attendance and truancy are things that, again, 32 years in MPS, attendance has always been an issue too. Truancy is certainly on the rise. Post-pandemic, we've seen that. I think, again, this is where we do a lot, right? And oftentimes, this is one of those areas where what else can you do? What other ideas are out there? We provide students free meals, right? Breakfast, lunch. Some of them who stay for our after-school programs get a dinner. We have generous partners who gave us backpacks, so we provide them with things that, removing obstacles, right? Clothing, all of those things that students, especially of a certain age, want to come to school in cool, clean clothing. So we provide opportunities for that as well. And how do we motivate children? In your earlier opening, you talked about, I wrote it down because I wanted to make sure I remember that. Hope and opportunity, right? I think that's something that drives students wanting to come to school. And I think when they don't see that or have that, and that's maybe where the community can help as well. You know, we do a really great job of saying it's important that you go to school. Why? Well, because you get a job. Well, if you're in a home where that hasn't been the case, how do we get there, right? How do we engage more of the community? We were at Goodwill Talent Bridge just the other day and talking about how the community can engage our families, right? Is it through job programs? It's through job training so that then mom or dad are going to a job and then they can see, students can see, well, that makes an impact, right? Because it really does take some momentum around that. I often think of, you know, I went to Brookfield East High School, you know, and I say this to my friends quite a bit. The teachers at Brookfield East, anybody from Brookfield can quote me on this, weren't these rock star, amazing teachers that were so much better than teachers in MPS. Absolutely untrue. Great teachers in Elmbrook, great teachers in MPS. What made a huge difference was the expectation, and I'm not talking about families, I'm talking from student to student, right? Students there expected to go to college, expected to do well. Not because they were so much more evolved or better, but because that's what they knew. That's what they saw. That was their norm. That makes a difference. When you don't have that, who do you look to? It becomes much harder to do that as an individual as opposed to having somebody there with you. Whether that's within your own family, but certainly with your peers at school, especially when you're in that middle school to high school age where sometimes, you know, those of you who are parents know the influence of friends have upon your children, certainly my children included.
Last question before we turn it to the people at the tables around tutoring and out of school assets coming in to help inside the school. A lot of what MPS is focusing on, a lot of your comments today are around teachers and what teacher preparation. We all can agree hugely important, but there hasn't been as much of a scaled effort around tutoring. There are great examples of forward scholars, Carrie sitting right here, doing work exclusively inside MPS with tutoring for the last 3 years. Brittany Kinzer is out there somewhere who's done another program where she's working outside of MPS because she, you know, hasn't been able to get inside. Is that something that's valuable? What can people in this community do around those things? Some of those are volunteer driven. You know, can you just talk a little bit about the impact, the influence that might have?
Well, certainly, anytime the community becomes involved in helping, whether that's in the classroom, whether that's through donation, it is impactful. One of the things when we have partners that we can work with that can get on the same page, meaning, for example, with letters training. So our reading instruction needs to be of a certain model so that we don't have too many varied approaches going on in the school. We always, you know, even individuals who want to volunteer, you know, we do background checks, we have to do things. It's not us trying to be difficult, but we're working with students, right? So we always want to make sure that we have safety top of mind for them. And then obviously, again, we talk about cost. What are the costs associated with that? Where do we want to go with those limited partnerships, so to speak? Because we can't be everywhere, right? So those are all things that we take into consideration. And partnership tutoring can extend beyond some of what we traditional think of it. That is of utmost important, right? Reading and writing. How do we get in there to help those students who may be struggling? But there are, you know, other partnerships and relationships. Again, I'm going to keep going back to M-Cubed, our relationship with UW-Milwaukee and MATC, and the businesses that work with that, helping our students then get job skills, some of those soft skills, right? We work a lot with Rockwell. They've helped us tremendously to build up our Project Lead the Way and STEM opportunities. And some of that is tutoring in a different form, where I remember when I was a principal at View School, every year we happened to be blessed to be close to Rockwell. So we'd have a large number of girls in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade go over to Rockwell. see those as opportunities that typically weren't available for young Hispanic, African American females. So those are other opportunities for people to become involved. Again, I know I strayed a little bit away from the tutoring thing, I tend to do that, but anybody who wants to tutor has an opportunity to do that in MPS. We would ask you to fill out go through the volunteer process. There would be some training on how to engage in that, and then any larger groups, obviously, we'd certainly entertain that, and then we have to, make a value-added judgment. Is that relationship providing the growth that we want?
Okay, I've threatened a couple times to do this, and now really I am. It's time for us to take a pause, spend 10 or 15 minutes at your tables talking about this, but then Superintendent Galvan will come back up and we'll have either report outs or questions that weren't asked for you to ask of him before we break. And at your table, and there are people who are kind of helping lead the discussions, whose names are at the table. There is some feedback form here, and the question to kind of ponder is, where is it that we have the ability, where is it that we as a community want to dive in? There are going to be changes, and there's some instability around public policy at this point, or change that's coming around public policy. Where are the areas that we can dig in? We'll let you talk about it for 15 minutes, and we'll come back, and you can, if there are questions I didn't ask of the superintendent who you want to, you can do that as well. So thanks, everybody. Okay, folks, we're going to come back together, and if there are questions that were talked about at your table that you want to ask of the superintendent, or points you want to make with the group, again, this is the time to do. We wanted to leave plenty of time and opportunity for that. So Deshaun's got a mic, and if you raise your hand, again, if there's a question, Austin has a question, probably one of the questions that he sent me beforehand that I didn't ask. So, Austin?
Thanks, Joe. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, for coming to talk to us today. We had a lot of discussion at our table about the need for urgency and change. Like, we have a crisis in this city with academic outcomes. You're a new leader. We'd like to hear from you. Like, what can we do that's different, that's really going to change the outcomes that we're seeing? And, can you talk about governance? And, we had a lot of discussion about you can't drive change unless you've got leadership that's really committed to change and recognizes the problem. And we just love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, in terms of governance, I will say that, the board of school directors and MPS, all to a person, wants what's best for students. And I'll open this up in terms of community engagement. Anybody who lives in the city of Milwaukee and wants to run for a school board position in MPS, you're welcome to do so. And that's one way to make a direct and immediate impact for those who want to become involved in that way. Again, in terms of immediacy, I will continue to say that we are continuing to work towards making sure that our curriculum, our PD, is directly impacting student outcomes. That is something that we do need to improve on. For a little bit, we've been kind of straying off our path in terms of doing this social justice thing or that. And those are all important things, but at the end of the day, does it impact student learning? Each and every school in MPS have a school improvement plan. We've made a concerted effort to make sure that our work is directly related to what the goals are for those individual schools, both academic and around climate and culture, so that we address those and don't get off track, right? So sometimes in terms of having too many ideas in terms of programs and different ways of doing things detracts from what are the things that are working. So we're making a concerted effort to measure what we're attempting at those individual schools and then adjusting as we go. So those are things that we're doing immediately, right? When we talk about, again, I had a discussion here at the table, I think, to separate academic outcomes from what a student is living in their life is just not a reality, right? You're gonna always have that one individual student who can overcome, and people can point and say, well, look, Joel did it. He made it. Nobody helped him. That's an outlier, right? So we need to wrap around students. We need to make sure that we're continuing to do that. And we need to make sure that the students, again, if we see that we don't have a program in a certain part of our city or in a certain school, can we make it happen there? I don't know if that answers the question, but certainly we're going to do the best that we can.
Just one last comment. We do have a number of schools in this city that are educating kids with the same demographics that MPS sees, and are doing it with a much higher level of proficiency and at a much lower cost. So I completely agree that demographic issues make education harder, but we can do it despite that.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. And in Milwaukee Public Schools, we have an enormous amount of schools that are doing just as you said. Really high outcomes, doing the best that they can for students, and all students. We serve all students that come to our door.
Question, there's a consensus there are people that good teachers getting more money would attract teachers. We need to pay our teachers more. And the thought is, and proposes, if we could put as your priority, raising teachers' salaries to attract more people to go into the profession, to reward them, the most important education outcome is quality teachers, attract students, encourage students, inspire them. Could you design a budget, and even the unions who, like the school board, would support the idea of increasing teacher salaries, put that as your number one priority. If you're running a business and you've got a problem, you put your money where the most success is going to come. Good teachers will make success. Then you cut the rest of your budget, I don't care if it's facility or what, to focus on more money for teachers, attract more teachers, more to go in the profession. That will help students attend because they'll get inspired. They'll want to attend. Students are saying good things about their teachers. So could you think about driving your budget around a singular goal that solves your number one problem, as you define it, getting quality teachers that inspire students, excite them, and want to go to class?
Again, anytime you talk about increasing teacher pay, I'm all for it. You know, regardless of where they teach, private, voucher, whatever it may be, university, I'm sure they would all love to get paid more. But I think what we need to get to first is immediately, how do we entice young people to go into that world of teaching? Because I'll be honest with you, I have not worked in the business community except for summer jobs or things like that. Teaching is hard. And I think for some of you who maybe have friends or maybe yourselves who during the pandemic were trying to do that work, you understand that maybe a little bit better. But how do we then, you know, my son and my daughter are younger. You know, neither of them chose to go in education. I think that's probably because of the work I do. But, you know, most of their friends don't see that as a sexy job, a job where you can make a living, where you can, you know, take trips and do all these things, right? So maybe that's something we need to do a better job of, is selling teaching as a wonderful thing to do. That gives you back things that maybe aren't always measured in terms of money. You know, that feeling of you're helping somebody, you're improving your community. Those are the things that for me are of most value, right? Knowing that I am helping people in Milwaukee, you know, and not because of anything else, but, you know, people have opportunities to go somewhere else. I've never done that because the work that we do is that important. So, you know, going back to your question, yes, we would certainly consider, and we already do invest, the great majority of our budget spending goes to teachers, right? We are very competitive in terms of the marketplace for teacher salaries. So I think at a, you know, a certain level, anytime we could increase what teachers are making will draw a few more. But then to keep them there, making sure we support them. And I think, again, most importantly, as I mentioned earlier, is just a general consensus or a general idea that, you know, teaching is a valuable profession. Teaching is something that I think we don't respect as much as we did when I was a young man, for whatever reason. And it's become very quick to say, well, you're doing a bad job, therefore the teachers aren't doing well, it's all the teacher's fault. We have to improve. I'm not walking away from that, but there's a lot of things that I think within perception, within community feeling, within community engagement could make it so that somebody wants to go into that world, somebody wants to go into that line of work.
Hey, thanks so much for your time today. First of all, if anyone wants to talk about getting more teachers to Milwaukee, stop and talk to me afterward. But super specific reading questions. So the best states for reading? The best states for reading are Florida, Massachusetts, and Mississippi, and they all pretty much got there the same way. Phonics-based curriculum, retraining the teachers, interacting with parents, and holding and kind of holding people accountable. So as you said, there's a new law being passed, and so I just want to talk about MPS's implementation. So before they pretty much got there in 6 years. They turned, Mississippi went from bottom 5 to top 5 in 6 years rather than the 20 that we often talk about. So first of all, nothing really changes until teachers get trained, right? It was supposed to be a 1-year training. DPI basically said they're not going to enforce that, and so MPS and other districts are taking 2 years to train teachers in reading, meaning it's going to be 2 years until anything happens with reading growth. Can you explain why it's going to take 2 years instead of 1? Secondly, when you talked about the superintendent search, is that a deal breaker to have someone who has implemented these reforms already in their state or district? So not just a nice to have, but a deal breaker of implementing these reading reforms. And third, not that it's unique to MPS, but it's hard to get parents to show up for anything these days post-pandemic, right? In a couple of months, you're going to have to send plans to to parents that their kids are struggling reading, and you're going to interact with them. How are you going to get parents involved? So one more time, why is it taking 2 years instead of 1 to train? Is it a deal breaker for the next superintendent to implement these reforms? And how are you going to get parents engaged on reading?
So I might ask you to repeat that along the way. So I'm going to start with number 1. So we've already begun that process, and thank you for the question, and I know you come to the board meetings quite a bit. So we've already begun that process. Some of the delay is simply we haven't had all the information necessary as to what those timelines would be. The state still hasn't released that $50 million that was supposed to be going towards all schools to help support this program rollout, training, curriculum materials, all those things, right? We are in the process. I'm going to look over here for a quick second. All our teachers are being trained already. Our administrators have been trained. So simply, logistically, it's going to take us that long, right? But we are, I would say, ahead of the game in terms of some of our neighboring districts, right? And we'll continue to push that forward. And then to be clear as well, just to backtrack a little bit, we have had phonics instruction in different isolated kind of, areas, right? I remember, I'm not going to name the program, but even when I was a principal at a school, we had a program directly related to phonics, and all that was happening, and there was some progress. There were some areas that needed to improve upon in terms of comprehension, and I think this new system that we're implementing does tackle that. Sorry, number 2.
Yeah. Is it a deal breaker to hire or to have the next superintendent be someone who has rolled out these reforms before?
Well, I think it's a deal breaker in terms of understanding that there are no options here, right? We're doing this, right? Whether the next person wanted to or not, it's a law and we're going to do it. I think that the bigger picture would be a superintendent who has experience in leading change, whatever that may look like, whether that's at a building level, at a district level. Implementation of a program is always a difficult thing, right? That saying that change is hard. Change is harder when a teacher believes they've had success in a certain area doing it a certain way. So I think having that data that shows that this has been impactful and successful will help lead that. And number 3?
Yeah, getting parents involved.
So again, part of DPI's rollout is we're waiting for some of those parent letters, some of those things that we are required to do, and we will do that. To your point, very well taken. We are banging our heads against the wall trying to figure out how to be, become more engaging, right? I think that is one area that we have made a concerted effort we have meetings, we have robocalls, we send stuff out en masse, we send stuff out through email, through Twitter, through social media. So we'll continue to do that. And when we get those letters and those final details from at DPI, we'll certainly have meetings around that and share that out to the public.
Can I make one slight clarification, then we'll take Clarence over here. Is the superintendent's search is going on. There's an outside search firm that's doing that at the request of the board. There's board involvement. You and I never asked you, you haven't indicated whether you're going to be a candidate for the permanent job. That is open until the end of November, and there's a process that goes, the posting is up till end of November. So just to make sure, you're not making that decision, but I think the reason why you're here today and part of this conversation is around that sense of urgency that Austin talked about, that whether you're here for the next year or the next 10 years, there needs to be a community action and action around what we're doing.
Thank you, Joel. It's a good segue into my question. First of all, thank you for being here, Superintendent Galvan. So we talked a lot about that these 5 areas identified in terms of our table talk questions. There's no one area that is a panacea, right? This is a holistic issue, challenge. It's a multidimensional. One of the things that NPS has not been very good at, we agreed on that here at least, is public-private partnerships. How can NPS do a better job reaching out, connecting with the corporate sector, engaging them, and ensuring that they're part of the solution, part of the conversations? One of the ideas that we talked about at our table is, for example, there's a program in other states called an executive on loan. So the corporate sector has an executive, or several perhaps, who are working with the public school system. Again, NPS has not been receptive, I'll say, over the past several years with engaging the private sector. How do you go about doing a better job, more effective job with that?
Again, I think one of the things, and I had this earlier conversation with Joel, one of the first times we met, in fact, this idea of being difficult to work with. So a couple of things on that. First, on an individual level, I do want to make clear that some of our processes, some of our legal maneuverings, so to speak, things that we have to do sometimes make it so, right? And those are things that we're trying to figure out ways that we can improve on some of those processes, and at the same time still be accountable to audit, to our constituency, so that we're not mismanaging funds or things going sideways on us. In terms of, executive kind of, if anybody has a comptroller that they want to lend to me on a permanent basis, please send the names my way. We'd be happy to do that, right? We do try to engage. Another issue that I think is a little bit difficult is that how do we match what the business community can provide to what our students need, right? And sometimes maybe an analogy is, right, if you have a company and they're making a square peg, how do we, and we need help with that, right? And maybe the leader of that company that makes a square peg can help me understand how you can support us, right? Because it's sometimes I think that difference is that we don't know necessarily all the time how you can support on an individual basis. Obviously, things such as contributions, again, I'll go back to Rockwell because it's one I know very well. Rockwell has made a concerted effort to help. Now, at the end of the day, understanding that they need engineers, they need people to do the work that they do, and knowing that they weren't getting those kinds of students going to UWM, MATC from Milwaukee Public Schools, they invested in programs, in trainings, in things that were very specific to what they needed. So those are some of the things that, and certainly I'd be open to suggestions, ideas from the business community themselves on how we can do things a little bit differently and more openly. Certainly I'm willing to have that conversation.
Sure. And just one thing I would say is, I think this is a good start with that transparency, but I heard a few giggles when you said you needed a comptroller. I mean, if there are people of goodwill in the business community who want and need, feel like they need Milwaukee Public Schools to succeed, I think that was an invitation from you to, and again, if there is need for that, you have a new CFO and somebody who I think some of us who worked at the city know there is an opportunity for us to do that. So again, that to me bespeaks the urgency. The public school district in Charlotte, Mecklenburg has, I think, 10, over the last 2 years, the business community has sent 10 funded positions to their school district. We may not be able to do 10. I don't know that we're at a point where we can do that, where MPS is willing and able to do that. But if there's the ability for us to do something like that, again, whether you want to go through me or go directly to the superintendent, that's one way we can help. Sorry, Bill.
Well, no worries. I'll make it brief. I think one of the asks, while we have the whole business community right here, is how do we get more of the business community to lean in? So earlier you mentioned about going to Rockwell, but how do we bring Rockwell into the schools? Instead of just looking at one position, how do we bring more of the executives in here coming into the schools, whether it's, I think a lot of us do mentoring programs, tutoring programs, but I think until we look at it from a business standpoint, if we're about to buy a manufacturing facility, $1 million manufacturing facility, or a $1 billion manufacturing facility, as somebody mentioned earlier, probably most of us would probably visit that manufacturing facility first before we bought it. And the thought process is the schools are going to be the most important manufacturing facility that we have. The most important asset, our children. How do we get more of our executives to coming in here, taking a look at the manufacturing facility? And I think it's going to be a double return on investment. First of all, the students are going to be able to see these different industries. They're going to also be able to see business owners that maybe look like them, executives that look like them, that are successful. But then also the takeaway, so when our executives leave from there, there are going to be things that they see at these different schools that say, hey, how about this? How can we change this? But I think a lot of us, we have perceptions, that was mentioned earlier, but I think until we start getting more of us actually coming to the schools, coming to this, and I think it's something that's really easy for us to do, where we could reach out to the GMC and we're doing this with some of the other organizations I've been involved in, where we could make a commitment, we're actually visiting those schools, whether it's on a quarterly basis, a monthly basis, 2, 4, 10, but I think that input, that visibility, both sides, from the business community and also from the student community, I think will be a huge return on the investment.
Apparently we only have the mics till 1:30.
Immediately what I would say is anybody who wants to visit a Milwaukee Public School is certainly welcome to do so. Obviously, with safety in mind, we want to make sure that we're following procedures, but certainly you can let Joel know, you can reach out directly to me, and we can make that happen to visit a school. If you want to come down to central office, not a lot of really exciting stuff happening there, and a lot of other stuff, but you're certainly welcome to come down there as well. Again, you need to make sure that we can plan for that, and we do that already.
I would just
for the Milwaukee Public Schools Foundation. So
Oh, yes, thank you.
Private sector individuals, John Percy, who's a coach here, I saw Carl Miller, yes, thank you. Mark Sablejack. We organize not only to raise funds that go directly to teachers and students, but we also organize a number of their great events to get private sector into the schools. So we're a great outfit if anybody needs a little bit more coordination and doesn't want to go to the center.
Thank you so much.
It's right there, yes. Okay, so I think we're done. I'm gonna turn it back to Peggy. One last thing to just leave you all with. Today is Veterans Day. My father, at age 18, having grown up in Manitowoc, Wisconsin, enlisted in 1945, thinking he was going off to fight in World War II. Well, the war ended just a few months later. He served his time. He ended up here on Marquette's campus, and so I'm not only I'm not the first in my family. My parents met at Marquette. But I say that not just to give you my family history, but he was part of a generation that felt called to that effort and what that meant for the world. I think in some ways what we're called for now is to meet the challenges of what we need to do in K-12 education and every kid who's in K-12 education, and give them opportunities to be here, be elsewhere, and be contributing members to our community. So thanks everybody for being here. I'm turning it back to Peggy.
Thank you, Joel. Thank you for joining us today for this very important conversation. Mr. Galvan, we are grateful for your time. We're grateful for your willingness to speak with us and listen to us. And as was said, this is a good first step in that regard, and we very much appreciate it. It's clear that you and so many others in the room care about the future of Milwaukee's youth and MPS's ability to provide the positive educational experience we know those kids deserve. Our ability to support education needs in Milwaukee is paramount to our community's success, and that is why education is one of the strategic areas of focus at the GMC. I would ask you to please leave your discussion notes at the table for GMC staff to collect. If you didn't write your notes down and you want to take that sheet with you, please do so and send your comments to Heather. We're going to synthesize information, both the questions and answers that came up orally and those items that you capture in your notes. We're going to synthesize that and share that. So the meeting is officially adjourned. And now for the always fun part, today's giveaway. We have a prize worthy of any Golden Eagles fan. And if your bias leans a little more toward the university to the west that wears red and white, or the one to the north that wears blue and gold, or black and gold, excuse me, we're confident you know or are related to a Marquette lover who would appreciate this. So pay it forward. This prize includes a large blue and white blanket, a blue Stanley style cup, and our favorite part, something that crosses all institutional bias, a Mike Lovell memorial pin. The pin is adorned with a sunflower, a symbol of sarcoma awareness and hope. Today's winner is Josh Gimbel.